Hello and welcome back to Deck Doctor. This week I'm going to be bringing you a Green Red Warstorm deck, but with a bit of a twist. Community member and French Faeria veteran Maihem gave me this list, and he built this in response to all the aggressive decks that have been floating around the ladder. This deck uses Rebel Glider in combination with buffs to help stop aggression, but also to help slow down blue decks, which rely so heavily on that Forbidden Library. His mobility allows you to go straight down the middle, clear farmers, contest aggressive creatures, but also deal with that Forbidden Library. Other than that, this builds like a conventional Warstorm deck. You build to one side, you get your lands down, you control the wells to double harvest, and eventually your Warstorm will come down and hopefully have a major impact on the game. So let's go into the cards and see what this deck is packing. So this deck packs a lot of creatures, but to start things off, we're going to talk about your Faeria Gatherers. Underground Brigand is a great free cost Faeria Gatherer that gives you Faeria once he is in combat, so this will help you get your Warstorm Champions out, even if you haven't got double collection going. Axe Grind, I've talked about time and time again, one of the best early creatures in the game, not only for aggression, but also with answering aggression. He's a great card to contest Dune Drakes, one of the most popular aggro cards in the game. Last but not least is Sagami Warrior, a card that's been featuring in the Warstorm decks quite a lot. This card doesn't quite feature in the mono green mid-range decks that we've come to know, as its stat line doesn't quite compete with stuff of Kodama and other cards. But in this deck, it's pretty good because it's cheap, it's going to collect your Faeria, but its dash also allows you to develop it, and it can dash out of danger, it can dash into a better collection spot, it can dash to block collectors. So the dash mechanic gives you a lot of flexibility anyway of what you can do with your creatures, and that's where Sagami Warrior really shines in this deck. So up next we have the damage-based cards in the deck. Cypher's Wrath being one of the only events in a card. Great 2 Faeria removal, takes care of collectors, helps you clear other creatures, and deals a bit of damage as well. Groundshaker, one of the most solid 6 Faeria cards in the game, with a gift of dealing 1 damage to all things on board, including your opponent's orb. A 5/6 body, very hard to deal with, but also has minor synergies with Warstorm Champion, but also going to help Cypher's Wrath finish some creatures off. Warstorm Champion up next, one of the key cards in the deck, mainly what the deck's been built around, but Rebel Glider in this variation is to help you fight the metagame. Warstorm Champion costs 6 lands altogether, 3 forests, 3 mountains, so he is a pricey card at 7 Faeria, so it's going to take you some time to get this guy down, so hopefully all those other creatures I just talked about will help you get to a point where you can play this quite comfortably. It has Slam and Dash 2, so it can dash into a great Faeria collecting spots, maybe into aggressive spots. Slam will help you deal with the board as well. But it's his gift, which is what makes him so interesting. He does 4 damage randomly split among the board, and then gives +1/+1 4 times randomly split among allies, including himself, so he can buff himself with his ability. And this is what makes him so cool. Like, he does a bit of damage, he gives you a bit of power to the creatures on board or to himself, and then he has Slam, so he's going to be causing a lot of chaos. So yeah, this is, like I said, one of the key cards of the deck, but it is going to take you some time to build towards him. So this deck does have 2 major buffs within the deck. We have Tiki Caretaker, give +2/+2 as a gift. It also acts as a Faeria Gatherer. Now, if you do prefer to have some healing in this deck, you can swap the Tiki Caretaker out for a Runin's Guidance. So that gives you a bit of utility there. You have the buffs, but you also have the heals. The one thing that Tiki Caretaker does do is it does collect Faeria for you. It can be buffed by Warstorm Champion and Elderwood Embrace, but it also can help you clear stuff by just getting that extra 1 damage for your Groundshaker, or maybe even your Cypher's Wrath. So there's pros and cons to both Guidance and Tiki Caretaker, but in this list specifically, Maihem has opted to go with the Tiki. Next up is Elderwood Embrace, pretty much the best buff in the game outside of Gift of Steel, I would say. Gift of Steel does have some requirements and is limited to only the combat effect creatures within the game. However, Elderwood Embrace can play on anything, which is great, and that extra 1 health can be the difference between your creature dying and your creature living when it comes to combat. This card will definitely be able to keep your creatures alive. You can abuse this card against red quite a lot as well. So if you're going up against a lot of red decks, Elderwood Embrace is fantastic. They have no hard removal, so they're going to have to pump damage into those extra stats. So yeah, I would say you want to utilize these buffs as much as possible to keep your board intact and build towards that Warstorm Champion. Always use these buffs, keeping in mind of hard removal as well. So you don't want to pre-buff something if you think they're going to have, say, a Last Nightmare. Sometimes you might have to. Sometimes you have to take that gamble. But most cases, you want to be able to use these buffs proactively rather than defensively against classes like yellow and blue because of their transform effects and their hard removal. So this deck does have 2 legendaries in it. It has one of the staple legendaries, Garrard, but also packs Cypher as well. And we saw how powerful Cypher was in a Green Red Warstorm deck when Pelorn got 4th place in the last monthly cup, and he had some insane Cypher combos. If you haven't seen my recap of the last monthly cup, be sure to check that out, and you can see how much influence Cypher really had for him in his matches. So Cypher, in combination with all the buffs, makes him a really threatening creature because of his ability, but also because of Slam. You know, the Slam can allow him to clear multiple creatures, gain multiple stat buffs, and Silent Horsemaster also makes him very deadly. So a great card to be featured in mid-range red, but also I think it shines in this deck, probably even more than other red or hybrid decks, because of all the buffs and all the utility that comes with it. Next up is Garrard, the only real consistent AoE within the deck. Warstorm Champion does provide a little bit of soft AoE, but you can't really control where it goes, whereas Garrard, you guarantee that free damage on the enemy creatures, so you can plan it a little bit better than you would with a Warstorm Champion. And of course, he is a great creature because he's able to collect with his fly and charge too, and also being a 6/6 body is going to be tough to deal with. So I decided to keep these cards for last because these are the cards that make this deck so unique compared to the other Green Red Warstorm decks we've seen about. Rebel Glider is one of the key cards that Mayhem feels can answer the metagame, and what you do with this card is you want it in your opener, which I'm going to talk about in the Mulligan section, and he is able to dash right up the center of the board and contest any libraries that are developed, any early gatherers, or even any aggressive creatures that start to show up in the middle of the board. And in combination with stuff like Elderwood Embrace, he's actually a big pain. Like, he's got a lot of health, he's going to be flying around, clearing gatherers, clearing libraries, but you can also use the Silent Horsemaster to help him have more reach, so we can get to these Faeria gatherers a lot quicker. And I'll talk about this card more extensively when we go into land placement. Silent Horsemaster, I've already discussed one of its uses in combination with Rebel Glider, but this card is also great for getting your other creatures up and down the board to be able to clear your opponent's threats, but also to be aggressive as well. And this is a card that can make Cypher very deadly, and the Warstorm Champion actually. Silent Horsemaster in combination with any slam effect is devastating in the right situations. So look for some good openers with the Silent Horsemaster, and of course, as you build your land, you'll be able to kind of plan where you want your creatures to go, or build land to allow them to get those good trades. Alright, so the Mulligan is a little bit different than what I've been doing recently, as these are the 3 cards you want in your opening hand. You want to hard Mulligan, which means you want to throw everything away that isn't one of these cards. Rebel Glider being the key card because you want him as your opener, but also you want a buff to go along with him so he can start causing some chaos at the top end of the board. So if you don't have any of these cards, you just want to throw your hand away and try and find them. Other scenarios are, if you do decide that you want to keep some stuff, try to stick to one color. In dual color decks like this, sticking to one color is a lot easier because you don't have to develop so many lands in the earlier game. If you have like 2 land costs of a red and a green, it's very easy for you to get rushed down because you have to spread your lands out so much. But this is the hand you're looking for. One of these buffs with the Rebel Glider, and that will help you answer some of the threats that are in the current metagame. Alright, so we're going to do something a little bit different with land placement this time. We're going to talk about two strategies that you're going to be taking into account when you play this deck. So you're going to have your Rebel Glider strategy from your opener if you do get that opening hand I just discussed. And then you're going to have your general classic Green Red Warstorm strategy. So to start things off, I'm going to talk about Rebel Glider. So if you do manage to get Rebel Glider in your opener, and ideally with a buff, what you want to do is you want to develop the forest in the center, because this forest will give you a forest you need to activate your buffs, be it Tiki Caretaker or be the Elderwood Embrace. And you see I put a neutral just above the forest, so if you go second, you can actually get better positioning with your Rebel Glider. So I would say that going second is probably stronger with the Rebel Glider opening. So once you get your Rebel Glider down, ideally in this position, you want to push him right up the center. And he can move 2 spaces with his dash 2, and then he gets another move when he becomes active on the next turn. So once Rebel Glider is up there after your first turn, so you'll be able to do this straight away as you play him, you want the Rebel Glider to start positioning himself to take care of Faeria collectors, Forbidden Libraries. That's his primary purpose against non-aggressive decks. Against aggro decks, you can still do the same thing, because you can contest them playing, say, a June Drake right in front of you. Just above the neutral tile, if you look at the land tiles, is where a desert would come down against June Drake. And if Rebel Glider's sitting there, there's not a lot they can do, really. They're going to have to deal with him first, and then he can start to cause some chaos around that side of the board. So when you don't have Rebel Glider or the buffs in your hand, you're going to have to adapt a traditional Green Red Warstorm strategy. And the strategy these decks tend to go for is to develop to one side. And you want to go down the side your opponent's going down, because you want to be able to contest them collecting Faeria. And you have a lot of removal, you have a lot of buffs, so you should have a good time in able to answer your opponent and be able to take care of their creatures. And you want to be getting down your free forests and your free mountains. But also keep in mind that whenever you play a deck with Axe Grinder, and I mention this time and time again, make sure to get those Axe Grinder spots, because that +1/+1 could be the difference between you winning the board and losing the board. And Axe Grinder has a lot of influence in this section of the board anyway. So yeah, you want to just develop lands around the wells, you want to control these wells, and then when you find an opportunity to be aggressive, you can use the Warstorm Champions dash, you can use Silent Horsemaster. Another thing to consider as well, you'll be starting from your orb. You can also send your Rebel Gliders, if you get them later on, to contest creatures on the other side of the board. So Rebel Glider isn't completely useless if you don't get him in your opening hand. He can go and deal with the cheeky gatherers that go off to the opposite side. And they're usually low health stuff, because your opponent's not really going to have the time to invest big creatures over to the other side. They're going to try and chuck, say, Lore Thieves or Mochi, stuff like that, which Rebel Glider dispatches up pretty easily. So that covers Maihem's Green Red Warstorm deck. I want to say big shout outs to Maihem for giving me this list and letting me do a deck doctor on it. He does stream from time to time, so be sure to check out his stream, which I have put in the description below. And yeah, I think this deck is very rewarding, a lot of fun. He said it takes a bit of practice. You need to get used to positioning and also being able to use these Rebel Gliders in primarily a defensive deck. This is a slow deck that utilizes the card, whereas Rebel Glider by design is more of an aggressive card. But I just love the idea of it being used as a defensive tool as well, just kind of showing how flexible, a card that a lot of the top Faeria players wrote off. I think giving it that +1 attack, so Rebel Glider is a 2/3 now, definitely helped the card out a lot. So this is the last deck doctor before next year. I'm looking forward to 2017 and what it brings for Faeria. If you are about this evening, if you're not going out partying for the new year, I'll be streaming tonight some Faeria all the way up to the European New Year, and we'll also be playing some Jackbox games as well with some Faeria related questions. If you don't know what Jackbox games are, be sure to check out my Faeria meets Drawful video on this channel. It was a lot of fun making that content, but also I think the members of the community really enjoyed playing that game. Thanks again, guys, and thanks again for all the support you've given Faeria and myself and PlayFaeria.com throughout the year. Take care, have a great new year, and I'll see you in 2017.